Hello students, this is chapter 4.3. In the last presentation, I have discussed till the infancy stage. In this presentation, I will cover the childhood and then moving on to gender and sex roles. Talking about childhood, so the child's growth slows down during early childhood as compared to infancy, right? So childhood begins when the relative dependency of babyhood is over at approximately the age of 2 years and extends to the time when the child becomes sexually mature at approximately 13 years for the average girl and 14 years for the average boy. That is 2 to 13 or 14 years is regarded as childhood. So the child develops physically, gains height and weight, learns to walk, run, jumps and plays with a ball during the childhood. Now, today it is widely recognized that childhood should be subdivided into two separate periods, that is early childhood and late childhood. Early childhood extends from 2 to 6 years and late childhood extends from 6 to the time the child becomes sexually mature. Now let us see some of the features of childhood. During childhood, the child's growth slows down during early childhood as compared to infancy, which I already said. Next, the child develops physically, gains height and weight, learns to walk, runs, jumps and plays with a ball. Socially, the child's world expands from the parents to the family and adult near home and at school. So very true. If you observe a child, you will see all these things, all this nature in a child. Next, the child also begins to acquire the concepts of good and bad. That is, there is development of sense of morality during childhood. And during childhood, children have increased physical capacities, can perform tasks independently, can set goals and meet adult expectations. The increasing maturation of the brain, along with opportunities to experience the world, contribute to development of children's cognitive abilities. So these are some of the features of childhood. Let's talk about the physical development during childhood. Now, early development follows two principles. The first is that development proceeds cephalocaudally, that is from the cephalic or head region to the caudal or tail region, that is the feet. So children gain control over the upper part of the body before the lower part. You will see that often the child gains its strength from the head region first and then to the feet. The child starts to crawl with the hands first and then crawls with the feet. And that's also the reason why we see that proportionately the head region is much larger than the rest of the body. Second principle follows the proximodistal. So growth proceeds proximodistal trend, that means from the center of the body and moves towards the extremities or more distal regions. So initially infants reach for objects by turning their entire body. Yes, and then gradually they extend their arms to reach for things. And these changes are the result of a maturing nervous system, not because of any limitation, since even visually impaired children show the same sequence. So during middle and late childhood years, children increase significantly in size and strength. Increase in weight is mainly due to increase in the size of the skeletal and muscular systems, and as well as size of some body organs. Next, we have motor development. The motor development of childhood involves the major accomplishment in gross and fine motor skills. So gross motor skills during the early childhood years involve the use of arms and legs and moving around with confidence and more purposefully in the environment. And second is the fine motor skills, that is finger dexterity and eye-hand coordination. It improves substantially during early childhood. So during these years, The child's preference for left or right hand also develops. So gross motor skills, it strengthens the arms and legs use and movement of the arms and legs. Okay, so that is gross motor skills. And fine motor skills is the use of finger dexterity and eye-hand coordination. Holding a pencil, holding a cup, these are all fine motor skills. So other types of gross motor and fine motor skills are also there, such as during the 3 years of age, the gross motor skills developed in that age is that of hopping, jumping, running. Yes, and fine motor skills in 3 years of age is build blocks, pick objects with forefinger and thumb, use of forefinger and thumb. And if you see, uh, at the age of 4 years, the gross motor skills is climbing up and down stairs with one foot on each step. And fine motor skills at the age of 4 years is to fit jigsaw puzzle very precisely. At the age of 5 years, gross motor skills is to run hard and enjoy races. And fine motor skills involved at the age of 5 years is hand, arm, and body all coordinate with eye movement. Next, let's see cognitive development in childhood. Now, the child's ability to acquire the concept of object permanence enables her or him to use mental symbols to represent objects. Alright, so cognitive development in early childhood focuses on Piaget's stage of pre-operational thought. So here we will see Jean Piaget's pre-operational thought in order to understand the cognitive development in childhood. Now the child gains the ability to mentally represent an object that is not physically present. For instance, children draw figures or designs to represent people, trees, dog, house, etc. This ability helps the child to expand her or his mental world. And this is what pre-operational thought means. Alright, so it is basically symbolic thought that develops. Now here the salient feature of pre-operational thought is the first one is egocentrism, where ego over here doesn't really mean ego, but it means self-focus. So children see the world only in terms of their own selves and are not able to appreciate from others' point of view. They only see and appreciate what they think from their own perspective. Alright. The children, because of egocentrism, engage in animism thinking. Animism thinking, that means that all things are living, like himself or herself. Like the child himself or herself is living, so the child thinks that everything around him or her is living. So they attribute lifelike qualities to inanimate objects. For example, you will often see that if a child, while running, slips on the road, sure he might show animism by saying, "Road hurt me," or "the stairs hurt me," or "the table hurt me." Getting the point? Next salient feature is centration, which means focusing on a single characteristic or feature for understanding an event. Now, in order to understand this, let's see an example. Now, for instance, a child may insist on drinking a big glass of juice, preferring a tall, narrow glass to a short, broad one. So even though both might be holding the same amount of juice, the child will insist on taking on the tall narrow glass. Even if in front of the child, the person transfers the juice from a short broad one to the tall one, the child will not understand because the child is only focusing on the single characteristics that a tall glass will contain uh, much more amount of juice than a short broader one, even though the container is short but it is broad, it is deep. So the child is not focusing on that. The child is always focusing on the tall one. having the concept that yes, the tall glass will have more amount of juice than the short one. Okay. So we have seen that pre-operational stage, it is from 2 to 7 years. Now, as the child grows and is approximately between 7 and 11 years of age, that is the period of middle and late childhood. Okay, so intuitive thought is replaced by logical thought, and this is the stage, according to Jean Piaget, is the concrete operational thought, which is made up of operations. That is, the child can reason logically about concrete events and classify objects into different sets, and is able to perform reversible mental operations on representations of objects. So here, in under the concrete operational thought stage, mental actions that allow the child to do mentally what was done physically before. Earlier, everything was done physically, but now the child is able to do the mental actions. So the concrete operations are also mental actions that are reversible. Yes? So this stage allows the child to focus on different characteristics and not focus on one aspect of the object. That means earlier what we have seen is that the child only wanted the, the glass which is taller. Yes? That is physically the child is saying it. Mentally there was no mental action. Now, as the child grows and approximately between 7 and 11 years, the child now knows and is being able to differentiate, is being able to focus on different characteristics. The child will be able to know that yes, the a taller glass is quite similar to that of a short, broad and deep one, and both actually holds the same amount of juice. Okay, so even though the pre-operational child develops the ability to see relationships between different objects, she or he cannot do abstract thinking. That is, the child still cannot manipulate ideas in the absence of objects. For example, steps required to complete algebraic equations or imagining line of longitude or latitude of Earth, it is still lacking in the pre-operational child. Okay. So, what do you think a pre-operational child would have done? Of course, she or he is likely to focus on only one aspect, length or height, and concrete operations allow the child to focus on different characteristics and not focus on one aspect of the object. Alright? So, the growing cognitive abilities of children facilitate the acquisition of language. So, at this stage, there is also, with the cognitive abilities to differentiate between the objects, the child is also is able, cognitive abilities for facilitating the acquisition of language is also present. The child can acquire languages, can understand and can learn languages at this age. Next, let's see the socio-emotional development in childhood. Now here, the important dimensions of children's socio-emotional development are the self, gender, and moral development. So during the early years of childhood, some important developments in the self take place. Okay? So the child, due to socialization, has developed a sense of who the child is and whom the child wants to be identified with. This is developed under the socio-emotional development during childhood. And according to Erik Erikson, the way parents respond to their self-initiated activities leads to developing a sense of initiative or sense of guilt. Now, giving freedom and opportunity to play, answering children's questions, for instance, will of course create a sense of support for the initiative taken. Yes, if the child becomes deprived from such support, then she or he develops a feeling of guilt and low self-esteem develops. Self-understanding in early childhood is limited to defining oneself through physical characteristics. That means I am tall, or I'm a girl, I'm a boy. This is how the child understands himself or herself. That is self understanding. Now, self understanding also includes social comparison. Social comparison, for example, I am smart and popular. Now, this development shift leads to establishing one's differences from others as an individual. And once the children enter school, their social world expands beyond their families. Yes, because they are going to a new environment. They will be meeting new people over there in the school. They will meet teachers, they will make friends. So, therefore, the increased time the children spend with their friends or peers shapes their development. In this slide, I have given you an extract from your book where gender and sex roles has been emphasized. Now, during childhood, the child identifies himself or herself with his or her own gender roles. Yes. Now here we will see the gender and sex roles during childhood and how it is developed. If you go through this extract, you will see there are certain questions in the very beginning that is chess a man's game or women's game or both? Is baking a woman's activity or a man's activity? What about driving, debating, and experimenting in a physics laboratory? Or consider some of the products sold on TV for young men and young women. What do they tell about how girls and boys should be? So, psychologists have meticulously researched on whether sex differences exist, and then research shows that males have been consistently found to be more aggressive than females. Men perform better than women on tests of sit ups, short run speeds, and long jumps, whereas women show better fine eye hand coordination than men do, and their joints and limbs are more flexible than men's. Now, what do you think is the origin of these differences? Are these essential, or, in other words, are women born with certain feminine traits and men with certain masculine traits? Or are these differences the creation of the world we live in? What is it? So, the most powerful roles into which people are socialized are gender roles. So, they specify the range of behaviors which are considered appropriate for males or females. While sex refers to the biological dimension of being male or female, gender refers to the social dimension of being male or female. Getting the point? So there are several aspects of gender. Among these, important ones are gender identity of male or female, which most children begin to acquire by the time they are about 3 years old and can accurately label themselves as boys and girls. Now, as they grow, preferences can be evidenced in their toys and play. The gender role is a set of expectations that prescribes how females and males should think, act, and feel. And parents and media are often the important influences on gender socialization, especially in the early years of development. So once children learn the role of male or female, they organize their world on the basis of gender also. So children's attention and behavior are guided by an internal motivation to conform to gender-based socio-cultural standards and stereotypes. So children also actively socialize themselves according to the gender mores of their culture. So once they have internalized gender standards, they begin to expect gender appropriate behavior from themselves. So that's the reason why young boys may refuse to wear feminine clothes in a fancy dress competition, or while playing house, girls play certain kind of ghar ghar or something like that. Games are there. So girls may refuse to play the father's role. And once they have identified with their own gender, children may model after a powerful cultural figure of the same gender. So here the gender tapping occurs when individuals are ready to encode and organize information along the lines of what is considered appropriate or typical for males and females in a society. Getting the point? Lastly, we have moral development, which is another important aspect of the child's development in learning to differentiate between the rightness or wrongness of human acts. So, the way children come to distinguish what is right, what is wrong, and to feel guilty, to put themselves in other people's position, and to help others when they are in trouble are all components of moral development. Now, just as children pass through the various stages of cognitive development, according to a psychologist whose name was Lawrence Kohlberg, children pass through the various stages of moral development, which are basically age related. Because with different ages, the moral development also changes. So Kohlberg, what he did is that he interviewed children in which they were presented with stories in which their characters face moral dilemmas. In one of the stories, the children were presented uh, with a character, Heinz. Now, Heinz, he had to go get medicine for his ailing wife, and it was quite late at night. He went to the chemist, and it was already time for the chemist to go home. And he requested the chemist to give him the medicine which he needed, which he required at that time. But the chemist refused because it was already late and he had to leave, he had to go home. So, in this situation, the children was asked that what is right and what is wrong, what should the chemist do, and if the children would have been in that situation, what, according to them, should the chemist do? So that was the situation presented to children, and they were asked what should be right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. So, according to him, according to Goldberg, children approach thinking about right and wrong differently at different ages. The young child, the young child that is before 9 years of age thinks in terms of external authority. According to her or him, actions are wrong because she or he is punished, and right because she or he is rewarded. Now, as the child grows, that is by early adolescence, the child develops moral reasoning through set of rules of others, such as parents or laws of the society. And these rules are accepted by the children as their own. Now, these are internalized in order to be virtuous and to win approval from others, that is, not to avoid punishment. The children view rules as absolute guidelines which should be followed, and moral thinking at this stage is relatively inflexible. As they grow, they gradually develop a personal moral code. And you have seen that by the end of childhood, a more gradual growth rate enables the child to develop skills of coordination and balance. So language develop and the child can reason logically. And socially, the child has become more involved in social systems such as family and peer group. Alright, so with this, we come to the conclusion of childhood. So here what we get is that we have seen that the childhood, it is that stage, that period which falls between 2 years of age till 13 or 14 years of age, right? We have seen physical development, we have seen uh, emotional development, we have seen motor development, physical development, motor development, cognitive development, socio emotional development, and lastly, moral development. So, I request you all to please go through this part once again and try to understand it. Thank you.